Not too long ago, I made a video about the Game Boy camera, using the Game Boy camera to actually film it. It was a bit of an overview and my own personal musings on its contribution to gaming history. In that video, I mentioned that Sony, some years later, did what Sony generally does and follow other people's innovations with a Me Too attempt. And if you Sony fans out there are about to get pissy, I want you to think about, I don't know, say things like the Move controllers, and if we'd ever have seen anything like it at all from Sony, if not for Nintendo doing it first and leading the way. Probably not right. Be honest with yourselves. In any case, baiting a few cranky comments from hardcore fan drones aside, hello again, I am Blunty, and today I'm taking a good old-fashioned photo walk with the Go! Cam. I'm also recording all of these two camera pieces with the Go Cam and trying to do green screen as well, which, with a video resolution this low and this brutally heavily compressed, is more of a I wonder how good I am test rather than anything practical. But I did the whole Game Boy camera video using the Game Boy camera, so might as well stick with that gimmick. I am, however, saving you the misery of the onboard audio and the microphone for the Go Cam, which is unlistenably terrible, so I'm using a proper microphone to record this little lavalier thing here. You can thank me in the comments. Now, the digital camera peripheral accessory for the PlayStation Portable, the PSP, model number PSP 300. In Japan, it was released in late 2006 under the name Chotto Shot, meaning quick shot. About 6 months later, in May of 2007, it saw shelves in pretty much the rest of the world. And let's be under no misconceptions here. Even for its day, the camera quality was not what you would call great. Or good, even. Much like Nintendo did many years before with the Game Boy camera, Sony built down to a price target, not up to a quality target. It was, after all, intended as a toy, not any kind of serious or practical photography tool. So, on the hardware side of things, we get a camera with a 1.3 megapixel sensor. The lens is a wide-angle affair, and in terms of full-frame reference points, it's a f2.8, 28mm equivalent. The kind of camera sensor and lens arrangement that was really common in camera phones of the day. Unlike those camera phones though, without the depth restraint that the phones had, to be able to fit in your pocket nicely, Sony smartly introduced an adjustable lens to allow for macro shooting. Useful focus distance in standard mode was about 40 centimeters to infinity. That's about 16 inches for those of you in backward-ass pre-industrial countries who have yet to embrace the modern scientific standard of metric. The official specs don't actually mention a distance for the macro lens, but in practice, in testing, I'd put it around 4 to 8 centimeters. That's like 1.5 to 4 inches once more for you imperial country bumpkins. Now, there's built-in functionality for the camera right from the main, cross-media bar. This gives you access to several key settings. Quality modes, of course, resolution amongst them, frame rate for the video, things like that. Though, frankly, even in its best mode, the quality isn't great, so I can't see much point for diminishing it further on the lower settings unless you are really starved for storage space on your memory card and you really need a shitty photo of something immediately, so urgently that you can't do a little data management to clear up a few extra kilobytes here or there for the maximum resolution one. I don't know why they have those settings, they just do. I think kind of most of these options and their extremely limited usefulness are just there to have more lines on the spec sheet and marketing blurbs. So it can do this, and can do this, and can do this, and can do this. You're never going to use all this, but it can do them. The useful ones, though, are setting the white balance manually. This is pretty useful, as is being to manually adjust some exposure compensation. It can mean the difference between an unusable shot and a usable shot. There's also some filters. Most only serve to make the image much worse, but there's a sketch one, which is kind of interesting if used carefully, and a black and white high contrast filter that makes text a bit more readable if you're trying to photograph a document and hopefully make it readable. So that could be useful in some very specific circumstances. Not really though. Frankly, I'd rather just edit the basic photos with an outside editor on my phone or on the PC or whatever. To that end, getting your photos and videos off the PSP is actually surprisingly easy. If you hook up your PSP to a computer over USB, it'll just pop up like any other external drive. From there, it's a standard DCIM folder. Surprising, really, given Sony's propensity for making as much of their crap proprietary as they can, so they can goose their customers at every turn for, proprietary accessories. But no, simple industry standard DCF compliant folder. But if you want to have a little more editing flexibility right there on the PSP, there is an app called the Go Edit. A Japanese version was supplied with the camera on a UMD right there in the box. Outside of Japan, they cheaped out and it was just a download. Of course, a little over a year ago, Sony shut down the stores for the PSP worldwide, so you can't download it anymore. Luckily, the Go Edit software can still be obtained through the Internet Archive. It's a simple matter of installing it by copying the files across to the PSP's memory card over USB, in much the same way as you would get the photos off there in the first place. Unfortunately, the software is spectacularly bad, and I mean, it's literally one of the worst apps of its kind I have ever tried to use on any platform. PC, Mac, phone, Android, iPhone, doesn't matter. This is the worst of them all. And yes, worse than the Game Boy's photo editing gimmicks. Go Edit is slow, incredibly clumsy, it has a mind-shatteringly bad user interface design, and its capabilities range from stupid to useless, and everything in between. You can trim and edit video, which is of mild use, and you can use it to shoot with instead of the default app, but why you'd choose to do so is beyond me, as it's much worse than the default app is. It's slower, it's more clumsy, it has fewer options, fewer settings, and most bizarrely, while with the default app you can record video for as long as you have room for on your memory card, as I'm doing right now, with the app you capped at 15 seconds of video per clip. So don't bother with the app, really. Whoever developed it was either just a long way outside of their wheelhouse or actively just hated people and their user base, because I can't imagine a world where a team of developers sat down and made this and called it something that they're proud to let customers use. In November of 2009, Sony released a game called Invisibles. It was their attempt to jump on board the then mainly mobile phone-focused augmented reality trend, and also desperately chasing the popularity of things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, because it has a similar sort of gameplay gimmick to those. Being an augmented reality game, though, it required a camera. So Sony included a new version of the GoCam with Invisibles. Now you'd think 3 years after the initial release, Sony would take advantage of the huge leaps forward small sensor cameras have taken in the intervening years, driven forward as it was by the smartphone camera revolution that was underway. Cameras were getting better and better and better real quickly. But no, Sony did what Sony does. This new version of the GoCam was much worse than the original. The PSP 450X, as it was called, had one thing going for it. It looked nicer. Gone was the cheap and nasty and very dated looking silver painted plastic, and the build quality of the original camera is rubbish, by the way. In its place was a much more, late 2000s Sony Piano Black. When Invisibles was released, it seemed Sony decided that the camera they included with it had to be as cheap as possible while still allowing for the functionality of the game so they can keep their profits up, obviously. So, instead of the 1.3 megapixel camera sensor that the original PSP camera had, this newly redesigned PSP camera had a 0.3 megapixel camera. 1 entire megapixel less. Those of you who are more familiar with pixel resolution instead of camera talk of megapixels, that's a 640 by 480 resolution. Now, I don't have a PSP 450X model camera to show you a side-by-side comparison, but considering there's an entire megapixel difference, you can probably imagine. Which again, for context, for those of you more used to pixel numbers, the original camera spits out photos of 1280 by 960. The new camera maxes out at 640 by 480. Which is only 1/4 of the total pixel count of the original camera. So yeah, the new camera was built for the game and the game only, not for anything else useful as a camera in its own right. The photo files from the PSP 300, though, are saved in 24-bit depth sRGB color, but the limitations of the color sensitivity of the sensor and the dynamic range of the sensor made 24-bit depth color kind of pointless, because you can't see it. And as you've been seeing behind me, hopefully, if this green screen thing has worked, the image is pretty noisy. The highlights blow up pretty easily and very unpleasantly. The shadows are kind of murky and lacking in any sense of detail. It's a toy camera, which is what it was designed to be, and that's fine. As I mentioned in the opening, much like the Game Boy camera and the Game Boy Advance cameras that third parties made, it was built down to a price, not up to a quality standard. So we can't expect too much from it, in all honesty. You've got to judge it on its own merits. And its merits is a toy. It would have been silly to expect it to even approach practicality or usefulness in duties that were asked of real cameras, even phone cameras back in the day. But as a toy, Well, it lacks the charm of the Game Boy camera, whose classic Nintendo touches, extremely low resolution and limited 4-shade black and white image processing gave it a unique and iconic look, and offers up some fun challenge for anyone trying to use it for creative photography. Meanwhile, the PSP 300 camera is just, well, it's just kind of like any other shitty camera sensor that was slammed into late 2000s mobile phones and similar equipment. It's just kind of crap. The image has no unique character to it, no charm, no retro nostalgia. It's just kind of a crappy camera. However, with a bit of editing in a proper editing program on a proper PC, there's a little hope for shifting its lackluster results to something with some aesthetic, perhaps even artistic value. Taking it to black and white helps a lot because you get rid of all that janky color and you're looking at tones and patterns and, you know, your composure and things like that. But frankly, when it comes to fun time shooting with a cheap or toy camera, there are just many more interesting options out there to be doing this with. And outside of the nostalgia value of you know, shooting with a PSP, the camera offers precious little to the equation. While we're on the subject though, I do also still have my PlayStation Vita, which has its own cameras built in. So I'm thinking that we move on to that next. Stay tuned, subscribed and bell for the notifications if you're not already otherwise done that, because who knows if YouTube will even show it to you otherwise. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty. I will catch you next time. Thanks as always to the patrons scrolling up above there. And I wasn't happy with the results, but I had fun getting there. And that's all that really counts, I suppose, when you're shooting with a toy camera. Some of what counts.